Okay, I'm sorry. If you've had 2 boosters and 2 vaccines, you can get and give COVID to another guy who's had 5 vaccines and 4 boosters. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between a vaccine and a booster? I don't know. Just more vaccine, but booster sounds better. Anyway, a guy with 25 vaccines would get and give COVID to another guy with 25 vaccines. That's why I'm introducing the daily COVID shot. Every day you get a shot. By the time you get to your car, you got no immunity. But it's a beautiful 39 seconds.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the So You Want Fries With That podcast. Please remember to like and share. All right, so this episode is going to be brief, and we are going to connect different videos to it to kind of help get the point across. Now, it will be long. The videos will be long, probably like 5 minutes of one and 3 minutes of another, and approximately there might be a third added to it. So, because this isn't a process that we're going to be putting together, but this video strictly covers what we can't cover, or that we can cover, but it doesn't maybe show up on YouTube if we word it and if the content is clear. But it's all about COVID, right? So let's get straight to the point. I don't know if anybody will see this video, if it'll be banned or whatever the case may be. But it all comes down to understanding that not everybody is smart. Don't get me wrong. I took the vaccine. I took both. I mean, I had my 2 shots. I had my shot and my booster. I was quite fearful about everybody coughing around me. And I heard someone coughing next door in the middle of the night. I was thinking they were about to die. That's how crazy it was. I was like, oh my God, they're probably going to be dead tomorrow, right? That's how much fear and how much panic. Keep in mind, they said millions of people were going to die, right? So with that said, I took my shots, right? Now, as we learn more, we learn as time has been going on that the vaccine really didn't stop you from catching it, but it could slow up or weaken the process of catching it without the vaccine, right? So we understand that for some people it was probably necessary, and probably for a lot of other people, herd immunity was probably best, because that was the overall goal in the first place, right? So putting other products that could be used to fight it, they had to be considered not a possibility for us to get the emergency vaccine, right? For it to be made and to be pushed as an emergency, you have to have no other sources of anything that you can take. And so everything else had to be put down, spoken down about. And of course, the people making the vaccine then paid to make certain that was out of the picture, right? So of course, with that said and done, let's just get straight to my point, right? Now, understanding what we know to this date in time, I was having a discussion in a salon, and it happened to be the person I was speaking to had a person that they were working on, which either was a doctor or a nurse. I'm not 100% certain. I'm thinking they would have said doctor. They said that they were in the medical field, and I think they said they were a nurse. And she said she was 100% for the vaccine no matter what, and no one would be able to tell her anything else. And she said she had 5 shots. 5. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, this is where it gets crazy, because what we now know, if you are watching any other things, we now know that herd immunity covers the length of 2 shots, and the shots should never be close together, because your body has to be able to get it, use it as it runs down, the spike protein and everything else runs down, then you get your second shot. But they give them to us back to back, which is possibly also maybe an issue for the deaths that came or from the blood clotting. I don't know if it's that, or if it's just naturally would blood clot and individuals are going to die. But they're saying at the same time, individuals would die from certain things like blood clotting and other things working against their immune system if they were already sick and so forth if they didn't have the vaccine. So with that said and done, I said, well, you know that they're saying that the vaccine had its issues, and so it was good for some and maybe not for all. Of course, she stated that her 5 vaccines was what she would do, and she would do more if needed. Now, my thought here was, how many vaccines are you going to take? You're on 5. When are you taking them? And does 10, 15, 20 not get across to the point where you're not realizing that your body already has it? It doesn't mean that you're necessarily immune to the new version of it, but your body should be able to break down any new version because it's spreading wildly, like the first one. It still spreads quickly, but it's less strength per se, right? It's not as strong. So with that said, I thought to myself, she is not a virologist. She is taking information that is told or that is said by Fauci, who then dictates the pace of the CDC, who then they both, CDC and him, when he was in charge, say this information to the general public. But there were other virologists that were saying that that is not the key. The vaccine wasn't going to work. And there were other things to take that should be taken first and foremost. And of course, that it was obviously made in the lab and not from a market. So with all these said and done, it came to me that doctors and nurses only follow through on the information they are given. They are not researchers. If someone says, hey, you need to give them this shot and the reason is this, they compute it and say that sounds correct. And they then, in return, take to the general public and attack the public with this information. But once again, I'll have to tell you that doctors and nurses are not smart. They are given information. The information could seem truthful. They're not testing it themselves, so they can't give you an idea because they're not researchers. And they then go with that information. And on top of that, depending on who is in charge, other people giving you other information, virologists saying that this is incorrect, they do not acknowledge. And that was a shocker to me. Because it showed me that just because you go to a doctor doesn't mean that the doctor's going to have an answer. And I understand that in a lot of cases, you go to the doctor, this doesn't work out, they try this, that doesn't work out. I mean, you know, you can say, hey, my sinuses or something, or something is in my throat, whatever the case may be. You go to the doctor and they try different things and they're just trying. They're thinking this could be the answer for you. And this has nothing to do with COVID. We're just talking in general, right? But it hit me that on a situation at this level and this amount of time being passed, of course, she wasn't wearing a mask, which shocked the hell out of me because we got 5 vaccines. You probably should be wearing a mask too. That's how crazy I'm thinking you are. But nevertheless, it just hit me that the reality to this was this individual said she had taken 5 vaccines and she would do more. And she was a firm believer of the vaccine. And I had insisted that in the places where the vaccine was not available, those countries had less deaths than where the vaccine was. Because keeping in mind that Africa did not get the vaccine. It was either a play on not giving black people the vaccine in that country, or they were trying to charge more than the country could actually pay. And this is the craziest part. At the time that the breakout was, I was doing Google ads with a representative that would call me from India. And the representative explained to me the population, how in-depth it is, how many people there are. And they didn't have availability to the vaccine as much. And you know what I thought? Oh my God, they're all going to be dying. It just comes to the point of realizing that what we created as being called a pandemic was not as bad as we thought. And with them talking about how they expect further breakouts, first of all, you can't expect a further breakout unless you could associate it and say, I heard of a few people getting sick in a particular area. But that is not the facts, because it always seems to fall on people in other countries, and it always turns out to be either eating something or having sex with something. Like the whole Ebola situation, we're now finding that there was a lab not too far from where the Ebola breakout was, and they were working on Ebola. They were working with particular, well, let's not call it Ebola. Let's just call, they were working on the particular things that would create that virus that then became called the Ebola virus, right? So whatever that was is exactly probably the case, that there was another outbreak from a lab, and then they tried to blame it on the people. And so when they're saying that they expect another outbreak, they're just basically saying we're working on labs and we expect something to be out. Also, be aware that when it comes down to Bill Gates, that is another person that you have to be wary of, because he has been trying to push a vaccine or something to Africans to get rid of malaria. But the Africans have been taking other items, other products that were told to us that we couldn't use for the vaccine because they were animal products or used for animals, which was not true because the dosage for animals was different. But nevertheless, let's get back to the facts. Now, instead of pushing it to Africa, he's now going to push it here because all of a sudden we're beginning to see a malaria breakout. Isn't this interesting? Because it will work and benefit for him for the drug that he's been working on for so long. Let's be fair. We have to get smarter. And for her, I would not go to somewhere that she's at. That is because at that point, she will probably be pushing whatever Bill Gates is pushing. Because that's what the CDC will be pushing, and that is what whoever is in control, the mouthpiece for the government, will be pushing. We got some problems, people. And this gets kind of scary to me. So anyway, I hope that this video that's coming up and the other video will kind of help you through this. Please watch. I know if you're not interested in finding out and you think that this is all conspiracy or it's all water underneath the bridge, that's fine. But please like and share or put a thumbs down. Hey, I don't care. Whatever you do, just show the interaction, and we appreciate it. And peace.
Walensky, couple things. As I walked in, I came in late. Either you or Dr. Fauci were saying that the reason that we're not saying that natural immunity is protective as is a vaccine, even though there's recent publications showing that 6 to 8 months out, 92% of those with natural immunity have T cells, B cells, and antibodies that would be considered adequate to protect. And indeed, B cell continues to climb. That we don't have data. Now, in your response to Mr. Casey, you just mentioned that CDC has access to tens of thousands of EHRs. And I've been told that HHS or CDC has access to patient identifiable data as to who tests positive. So I do that as a prologue. If we don't know that natural immunity confers protection against future infection, it's because we've decided not to look. Because I've learned that there is a cohort of people that we know have been previously infected. We've got the bench research showing that the triad of antibodies, T cells, and B cells are there, and that 92% of them are still there at 6 months out. So why have we not done the research showing that natural immunity confers protection against recurrent infection?
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to clarify this point because I understand the question. First of all, let me just reiterate that our current stand after reviewing 96 papers and a scientific brief on this issue is that everyone who's been previously infected should be vaccinated.
But that's not my question.
Agreed. So, and part of the challenge here is, as you know, the infection-induced immunity and the biases associated with retrospectively looking at the data. Several of those papers that we reviewed for that brief have demonstrated that the kind of disease that you had at the time you had it matters. Did you have disease a year and a half ago? Were you an older person?
Can I stop you for a second? We could do this prospectively because you know who is actually, apparently I'm told you've got patient identifiable data, and you would be able to say, okay, 6 months ago, we're going to start everybody infected within the last 6 months and be able to follow their EHR prospectively to see this. I mean, theoretically, CDC has the ability to do this right now.
Yeah, that too would have its own biases. So one of the things that we have demonstrated in the scientific brief is that asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic people who might not present to their providers, might present to an urgent care clinic, who might not be recorded in their own EHR, likely have less robust protection than those who've been severely
infected. But that could be established prospectively if using the data that you have. And you could even say, if you had symptomatic infection, you don't need to be vaccinated. We would consider you immune. You don't have to be subjected to the mandate. But
If we had data that demonstrated a correlation of protection, Dr. Fauci already mentioned data that they're working on to look at correlates of protection, not just in antibodies, but as you noted, in T cell function as well. So if we were able to document a correlate of protection, we absolutely could prospectively
this paper
follow.
that I'm reading from NIH speaks that there is durable memory of the virus up to 8 months after infection in 95% of the people who recovered, including B cells, which continue to climb, T cells, and antibody. And I'm also saying you could do it clinically because we have data that's patient identifiable that we could go back and look and see if they were exposed. They could be in a hot spot like Louisiana where you know they're being exposed, and then you would see, not just by lab data, but empirically. I can tell you the American people intuitively understand this, and they feel a little bit like we're being willfully blind to it. I have limited time. Let me just ask you something else. What percent of CDC employees are vaccinated?
We're actively encouraging vaccination in all of our employees and doing a lot of education and outreach in order to get our agency fully vaccinated.
But the percent?
I don't have that for you today.
I'm told that 75 to some north of 75% of CDC employees at headquarters are still working remotely. Is that correct?
We are following regulations through HHS and the federal government.
No, that's not my question. I apologize to be rude, but I'm asking a very straightforward question. I've been told that north of 75% of employees at CDC headquarters are working remotely. Is that correct?
Senator, I don't actually know the number off the top of my head.
Okay, when you look down the hallway, are there empty desks? Are over 50% of the desks empty?
Senator, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. What I will tell you is that we're working closely within HHS and the administration to follow the governmental rules for return to.
There was a recent GAO report that shows, and released in the last 2 weeks, that there's been no coordinated response on the federal government to get people back into work. Now, if there's any agency that, since we have teachers in Fulton County are back at work, that the caseload of COVID in Fulton County is about 88. At its peak, it was 606. If what I've been told by someone who, frankly, kind of knows, that people in laboratories are not showing up. I have no clue how laboratory workers who presumably are vaccinated wearing PPE would consider themselves eligible to stay at home.
Did I understand you to say that most who had died from COVID were the vaccinated, not the unvaccinated, or did I mishear what you said?
In the UK, Australia, South Africa, where they have good data systems, the contemporary, let's say late 2021 and 2022, the majority who have been hospitalized and died are fully vaccinated. So right now, New South Wales just put out their data. Now, Australia is interesting because they had pre-vaccinated the whole country and then COVID got there late. So Australia was the real test of whether or not the vaccines would work, and they failed colossally. So the most recent analysis, 99% of people hospitalized and died are fully vaccinated. United States, our CDC tracked these breakthrough infections. They tracked, people reported to CDC, May 1st of 2021, the CDC was overwhelmed with fully vaccinated Americans who were being hospitalized and died. They gave up. They put a notice on their website. They said, we gave up. We cannot track breakthrough infections. The vaccine was failing so badly.
Okay, I'm sorry.